Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. Hello, I'm talking with David Schripsema, former Kenosha Symphony Orchestra conductor. Thank you for joining me.
It's good to be here.
Okay. When did you come to Kenosha?
1973.
You came from school?
I came from graduate school. I worked in Grand Rapids, Michigan before that in the Christian school system, which is quite large. And I stopped working there to get my master's.
Okay.
And without wanting to come back, I was going to go on a new path.
Okay. What path was that?
That was going to be professional conducting. Anywhere in the United States, probably best. So yes.
And what brought you to Kenosha then?
I was without a job after grad school, and so I said to my wife, I said, "Yeah, we need money, I think. So I better find something." There was very few symphony orchestra positions at that time in the United States. Open. There were orchestras, of course, but open conducting, they were numbered. And so I said, well, I guess we're going to have to go to university or even school system. And so I looked at both, and of course, Kenosha was quite appealing to see. It was between two major cities. It was a brilliant music system headed up by Ralph Houghton at that time. And so it looked like, okay, I can work with this for a year. And then I'll get on my way again. I'll get on another horse and I'll go get my job that I really wanted. And so I came for the year, and I also came with a child. And so that was quite a thing to behold and to support. And of course there was insurance, and there was constant salary, and Kenosha was a nice place to be.
Okay. How many people were applying for the job that you were looking for in Kenosha?
That I don't know, but I believe it was many. I was in grad, just in the summer. It was at Michigan State University, and it was trimester, and so it went into the summer quite far, and that's when I was looking. There was a notice that was sent out from everywhere for different things, and so I called, and got the interview, and Ralph hired me on the spot. He liked, I guess, what he saw and what he heard. And then the next day, I traveled by myself for 9 weeks to Salzburg, Austria, to study at the Mozarteum University. And I came back the day school started. And my wife moved us from Grand Rapids, and she did everything all by herself. Bless her heart. And then I started up, but I joined the Kenosha Symphony at that time as well. They needed anybody and everybody, violins especially, and so I went to the first rehearsal and okay, I'll do this. So yeah.
You were hired, and Ralph Houghton had expectations for you?
He certainly did. The Bradford High School Orchestra was quite weak, very small, just a handful of players. And I don't know why at that time, but it seemed to be the feeder program of Kenosha that was feeding Bradford, and that was McKinley at that time, and Washington. These are all junior highs, and Bullen. And it was quite weak, the north side of town. And he said, I'd like to have you make this orchestra program on the north side as good as Trimper High School, which was a monster program, a beautiful program that Stan Nozel had developed over the years. And they played major repertoire. Tchaikovsky Fifth, Shostakovich Fifth, major works. And so I started with Haydn and some Mozart, and we built from there so we could get to the point where we could play some major works as well.
How long did he give you, so to speak?
Well, it was kind of interesting at that time. The band program, marching program was the apple of the city, Wisconsin, the country. It was a great program. And Ralph kind of, I think, expected you to move on after you've done what you wanted to do or could do, and then move on maybe to something else higher up, college, university, or thereabouts. And so I don't know. He never said in years, but he did have expectations. And he wanted you to meet those, and either the path was going in the right direction, and if it wasn't, he would see to it that your days were numbered.
And do you feel that you accomplished that expectation?
I do. Yes, it was ongoing. We also had new feeders, educators in all those schools. They all developed their programs, and they became quite good and very large. The three feeders that fed into Bradford, were really starting to happen. And by the time 1980 rolled around, when we moved into the new Bradford, I had 2 orchestras and a chamber orchestra. So I had 3 orchestras working.
That's quite an accomplishment.
Yes. Yeah. So we had a major orchestra, a big one. We had a chamber orchestra, and we had I don't want to say beginning, but we had a 10th, 9th, 10th grade orchestra.
A junior varsity.
Yeah, right.
Kind of. Okay, did you have any other positions that you?
Well, yeah. I was still seeking those city orchestras at whatever level. And Parkside opened up, the Parkside Orchestra, and I was invited to conduct it. And so I did, and I was with Parkside on and off for about 18 years of the career, and I guess conducted some orchestras around the country. And my summer experiences, I was conducting in Europe and around the United States. So
did that give you that sense of accomplishment as a professional conductor?
Yeah, it did, but it wasn't totally satisfying. But I was conducting in the Shenandoah Festival in '76. And I got a call from the Kenosha Symphony president, Terry Rose, and he said, "David, we want you to conduct the Kenosha Symphony." And I can't remember the application process, but of course I was, I don't want to say the fair-haired boy of town, doing a lot of work and a lot of playing as well, violin. And so it was an easy step. have to say, when I joined the symphony in 73, and when I got the job in 76, the board was over 20 people. Now, for a town of this size, that's a huge board.
What does the symphony board do?
Well, its main function is to raise funds for the orchestra, and but not all, 20 did that. There are many that were representing something. Carthage, Parkside, Schubert Club, and then the list goes on. They weren't really expected to raise the funds, but they were kind of in an advisory role more than raise money role.
At that time, how was the symphony funded?
In two ways. The one was the board, and we had an executive board as well, and they would contact the snap-ons and the jockeys and whatever, and they're still doing that, of course, but that to get the larger money. A large advertising book also. Everybody was designated, okay, you're going to go do this, you're going to contact these people that have done it before, and try to get new people on that list. So that's also the board's function. And the other thing, there was some grant writing. We had a symphony women's guild raising quite a bit of funds. And we had in kind the Kenosha Unified Schools. At that time, it was maybe even pre-unified, I'm not sure, Kenosha school system. And when the orchestra started in 1940, it was funded entirely by the Recreation Department of Kenosha. And these other organizations, such as the Guild, started a little bit later. So all in all, I don't know what the breakdown of finances could be. I started with an $11,000 budget, and the Kenosha Unified, I don't know if it was a third of somebody's income at the Recreation Department, or I never knew that because that was in kind.
Okay. So when you were hired as conductor and you had an $11,000 budget, were you being paid out of that budget?
Yes.
And what did you earn as conductor?
Probably about $3,000 of that.
And responsible for how many concerts a year?
At that time, we had 4. And I thought, oh, we can slip in, as time went by, another couple of years, we added 1. So we had a nice 5-year, or 5-concert season per year.
Were the players paid?
They were at the end of the year.
At the end of which year? 76?
Well, each year.
Okay.
At the end of each year, they got a stipend, kind of like a babysitting stipend for the children or something that they had to leave behind. But that turned out to be, I don't even remember, something like $5 a service. It was divided up with the money that the league donated. So if they donated $10,000, let's say that got divided up per person for how many services they played. So
how many people are we talking about playing at this time?
Anywhere between, I think we usually had about 50 on stage early on, up to 85. And it's in my heyday, I'm going to say. It goes up and down, depending on the concert repertoire. Also, I mean, if I did a February concert, so I could count the number of weeks, January into February. It usually turned out to be around Valentine's Day. So I had a little Valentine's special. And that concert orchestra was usually a little bit thinner. It was midwinter, and not everybody could be there all the time for a Haydn, let's say a Haydn concert, or closer to a chamber orchestra than it was a whole physical
Full-fledged.
Organization there.
Did your conductor job at the symphony ever conflict with your orchestra job, teaching job at Bradford?
Never. So, kind of proud of the fact that I had the Kenosha Symphony, I had Bradford, I had the blessing of Stan, although he wasn't involved in the orchestra, and Parkside, and so I kind of controlled the calendar, and so I never had a conflict. The organizations at both Parkside and Carthage, it seemed like they were still kind of in a growing stage as well, and with the staff that evolved over the years, the organizations at both university, college, really solidified and grew.
What was your involvement with the Carthage College?
Well, besides some ad hoc teaching, we had the base of the, I'm not going to say Kenosha Symphony course, I'm going to say Symphony course, because Kenosha used the chorus every other year with Racine at that time. Now Racine has Choral Arts, which is another organization that's really good. But so I had the Christmas concert with the choir. And the next year, Racine had the Christmas concert with the choir. And then I had the Easter season, or spring. So we rotated that way. A few times, we put it all together, both orchestras, Racine and Kenosha, and chorus, and we held it at the field house at Parkside, and we had a guest conductor, Margaret Hillis, came in and did the Verdi Requiem, for instance, and that kind of thing. So a couple times we threw it all together in one big mix.
And did you work with the Carthage choir at all?
The Carthage choir, not as my job, no, but as if they were guests of the Kenosha Symphony, then I would go to them and I'd work with that choir how I wanted things. And I did the same thing with combined high schools, Tremper and Bradford combining and doing a work with the Kenosha Symphony. And I even did that before I even got this job. I had the Tremper High School choir and orchestra, and I was the guest conductor. So I think that helped me get the job as well.
Okay, so you are hired as conductor, so what is your job as conductor?
Oh, many-fold in this situation. So there's different levels of orchestra depending on budget. A community orchestra, of which I had when I started, and now it is a different level. It's a higher level. I think it's called regional, I'm not sure. All the way up to major metropolitan, which is Chicago, Milwaukee symphonies. So the conductor of the Chicago Symphony doesn't have to do what I did. My job was to, of course, develop the orchestra always. That's a goal. You never want to see it fail. Choose repertoire for the size and quality of the orchestra. So you don't want to do a Mahler big Mahler symphony with 50 on stage. You want to have that at 100. The rehearsal is I think the most important. Conducting and shaping, balancing, each section, each wind, and that happens in the major orchestras as well. Playing in tune, correcting wrong notes, even, and that happens. I witnessed that in the Chicago Symphony. A conductor dismissing the whole orchestra except for the cellos. Said, "You're playing out of tune," and they worked a half hour getting this passage, just one passage, over and over until they got it right. So it even happened at the top.
Well, how do they get the orchestra in tune?
Listening, listening, careful listening. It's often, to pick out a wrong note in 12 violins is almost impossible. But you can kind of hear, what's that over there? But over here, in front of you, you have the flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons. Those are really transparent instruments. And to get those to play exactly in tune together and shaping them and so forth, that's ensemble playing. And that's what a conductor does. And just, saying, okay, not so much over here, a little bit more over here. Working with the board. The conductor is the, I don't want to say a servant of the board, but it's hired by the board and has to answer to the board for anything she does. So that's a fundraising. A good conductor is going to try to develop his audience.
How do you develop an audience? How did you go about increasing the audience?
Well, several ways. One, make it the most enjoyable experience you can for the orchestra to come. They want to be there. They want to be on stage. If they want to be there, they're going to want somebody else to be there. And that happened a lot. Then also having that one choral program a year. If the choir is, say, 85 people and they bring each a person or two, maybe three, you've put, and plus the orchestra of 50 to 80, you're filling the hall with just that. And then word gets out. The repertoire that you play, nobody wants to come and hear things that that they don't want to hear.
Is it something that they already know or have heard usually?
Yes, and that is kind of an evolution as well throughout, I'd say, decades. You can look at programs, and you look at our library, and you see an overture followed by a guest soloist, violinist, pianist, whatever, and then the main course, which could be a Beethoven, and it could be a Schubert, or it could be, depending on the season and how big the orchestra. Like a Mahler, for instance, is going to have 8 horns. I'm not going to get 8 horns. I can't afford 8 horns. So developing that way, the repertoire. In Kenosha, we sit between 2 major cities where they do those huge major complex works. The Rite of Spring, we can't do that. Try, but then people will say, ooh, that wasn't so good, was it? I don't think I want to go back. So they want to come and hear things they recognize also. And that's the evolution of what we're getting to today. All orchestras of every complex, every size is playing what people know already. And that's not Beethoven and Schubert. That's John Williams, Star Wars, for instance, and even seeing it on screen as it's being played. That's all part of getting people into the hall. And
Did you have any specific ways that you tried to engage for an audience?
well, for one thing, I invited all my colleagues in Kenosha Unified to join. All the string players, I encouraged them to be there. And if they're there, they're going to want their students there. So I had to develop also programs that young people would want to come to. And the board is willing to go along with that and offer free tickets to students. And so those teachers would take those tickets then to their schools and spread them out. Winds and brass, not as much. We have Louis Covelli was in the orchestra for a while, and Woody Hodges is still in the orchestra, and others like that, of a high caliber, and so that is also audience development.
Did you ever bring in people who did fundraising to talk to them or provide any kind of music to get them a little bit more excited about?
Well, actually, yeah. And that was kind of, I took that as my job as well. I call myself the first and possibly only resident conductor. And so as a resident, I had access with the president for one. We went, I'm going to say door to door to everybody, asking nicely for money. I could say begging. Where am I going to go with this thought a moment is I also invited some very top students to be in the orchestra, and they filled it out a little bit as well. So what I was expected to do was come up with a sound of like that budget orchestra way up here of say $250,000 to bring up an $11,000 budget to $250,000 is kind of a difficult thing, but we did it. We were expected to do it. I had friends in the city and said, David, oh, that wasn't so good, was it? I said, what? What part didn't you like? And they would be very honest. Now, these weren't board members; these are just people that wanted just a good sound. So, okay, I'll try to fix this kind of thing. We had that Symphony Orchestra League. I have no idea if we have one right now, but we had the league, and they would have coffees as fundraisers in different homes. Usually, the larger homes that can house more people. But that was kind of boring to go to somebody's house, have coffee, and just chit-chat, once or twice, once a month, or once a concert cycle. And so I had my guest artists go into the home, and I had coffees myself, and had the artist play for the women's coffees. One, that grew. Then I had them also go into the school system, to the high schools, to the middle schools, and play and teach as many artists and residents. And that grew. So we had those guest artists being excited in front of the students who now are excited. Now they're going to go home and say, Mom, Dad, I heard the most amazing thing, and I have tickets to go hear this artist. Will you go with me? And so all this is called audience development. So
And that was another role of the conductor.
Yes.
Here,
Right
as
here,
a community.
right. And it's difficult for a non-resident conductor. For instance, one of our conductors, Miriam Burns, came from New York City. It's difficult. She was here. Now the orchestra has gone into a professional mode. All the players are professional. I rehearsed once a week for about 7 weeks and had a concert. Now they block the concert cycle. Two rehearsals, maybe 3, and a concert. So the conductor, whoever that is, comes in for a short amount of time, doesn't have the ability, or does have the ability, but maybe not the time to go running around the town looking for money. So.
Okay. Let's talk about the orchestra for a bit. You become the conductor in 1976. You are working with Kenosha people in the orchestra only, or are you getting players from elsewhere as well?
Yeah, the elsewhere as well. You know, we couldn't have our own orchestra with boundaries at the county lines. Our community was from Chicago, North Side especially, into Milwaukee, of the university. And people want to play. They're always looking for places to play. Otherwise, why have this instrument? And in the radius of I don't know what, there are probably a dozen orchestras. Some like ours, which are now professional. Racine is professional. Green Bay, professional. They're all professional now. The community orchestra is probably history in our area. Maybe Waukegan still is. There's an orchestra now, Green, at Lake Geneva, doing well. It's a community orchestra. So they are few and far between. And the question I lost my following here.
The question had to do with whether or not you just used Kenosha people. You said elsewhere was
right. The elsewhere part, a very big deal. As a matter of fact, it got we could play a concert in Kenosha, and it was kind of like, okay, we're going to pick up all these people and put them in Racine, and we're going to do another concert over there. So, in answer to your question, yes, very much so.
The elsewhere part, they come from any place within a drivable distance, okay?
Right.
But what about looking for specific people? Is that still within that radius, or does the radius expand when you're looking for?
It can.
It can.
It can, yes. And then we had a mileage. We did pay mileage to those people up to the Kenosha County border. So yes, they weren't always available close by. One of our bassoon players came from Menominee Falls. I had a cellist from Menominee Falls. A horn player from out, I don't know, Chicago way. So they did come. And if it's worthwhile for them to come, they're going to come because they want to play.
Now, you find these people because you have their names?
Yes, we have a roster for sure, a very large one. I still have it at home. I said, what am I doing with this? But yes, we get a roster from my time. Yes, phone calls. We'd like to have you play for short here. To today, where the roster is solidified because it's a professional orchestra. They are, that list is sent out to all the players, the current players, and then some, and then they mark what concerts they're available for. And we have a personnel manager then that takes that and does a grid and says, okay, this person can play here but not here. Who do I have to plug in that? And she does that, and then says, okay, you're hired for this concert and that concert, or all four, or whatever.
So, being a professional orchestra now, and that later
Yes.
at that time, you're now paying people to come here and do this.
That's correct.
And you're paying them enough that they make a living if they get enough concerts to
If
play.
they get enough, yeah. Well, not really. They can't quit their day job. We're not that lucrative. So,
And did you use university students as players sometimes?
I
when
even
you
went.
were?
I even went down to high school. We had a couple of young ladies that became professional, just as an example, so I invited them to play and sit in the back, never in front of an elder citizen. I don't mean old. I'm talking about
An elder player, an experienced
yes,
player.
an experienced player, right? And they'll learn from that. And again, mom and pop might come along. We hope they will. And by and large, they added a great deal. Now that's not happening. In the 90s, when it became a professional orchestra, or even before that, no students were playing.
And that includes
And that includes
university?
college. Yes.
Okay. Now, you did use college.
I
students.
certainly did. And
And-
especially the faculty, inviting them to sit in key places, yeah.
But if you used a student from, let's say, Milwaukee, and they didn't have a car, how would they get here to play?
Well, I would definitely get in my van. Well, that wasn't a van; it was a wagon, and go get them.
Do you have any special stories about having to go up and bring somebody back with their instrument or anything like that?
I tried to get a violinist or a couple violins and a cellist. I had one really wonderful cellist that sat principal in the section, and I need a harp player. Ann Hambrock hasn't arrived in town yet. And so we have to go get one someplace, and that also was okay. There's one at Alverno College, so call her up and say, "Can you play?" "Yeah, I don't have any car," so up I go and get the harp with her in the front seat, of course, and bring her back. Come home again at 11-12 p.m. at night and show up at Bradford at 7 o'clock in the morning. So,
And the harp fit in your...
the harp did fit, yes, yeah.
Okay, now, how was your job at Bradford going along the same lines as you're now involved as conductor of the symphony? Is that continuing to work out well, the way Ralph had expectations, the way you had hoped it would be?
Well, it did. It was, quite wonderful. And there are other things that were happening as well. I don't know what date, but we had a student competition, solo competition to
Solo
play.
and ensemble and...
Yeah. No. This is just
different.
just a symphony competition to play with the orchestra, and maybe win some money as well. And that happened at I held that at Bradford. Again, being a minor control freak, I try to have as much in my ballpark as I could get. The instruments of, let's see. Okay, we needed timpani, we needed bass drum, we needed basses, we needed whatever. I just, took an afternoon and brought it down to Ruther whatever I needed. Had a little help also if I had to have risers or so from Kenosha Unified. I knew exactly what to order and get things done and down there. So yes, it was kind of my ballpark. So I could do with what I needed to do and make it successful.
And how long did you conduct the symphony orchestra?
Until '86. So
86.
I had a 10-year tenure. And yeah, I actually gave the board a 10-year notice that after 10 years, I really should let somebody else take over. And it so happened that it was a good thing because I was finding that I was quite ill with kidney failure, and so yeah, it was a good run, and it was and I had a list of, I think, 12 items that I handed in, and they addressed those 12 items over the next several years, which I was
After you had left?
After I had left,
Okay.
yeah, which I was very pleased.
And
with.
was that the end of your association with the symphony?
No, I did come back in Marion Burns' tenure of about, I don't know where she was in it, but she asked me to join. She wanted me in there to, because she's from New York, she wanted me to kind of be the go-between between conductor and board, because I knew what conducting was and what she expected, because we talked. And so we had just this little line going. And so I joined the board at that time too, whatever year that was. And I played for a bit, and because, we're just going to say macular degeneration, I couldn't see the notes as fast as others could play them. So I said, Miriam, I really can't do this, but I will still work with you, and I stayed on the board as far as I can remember. And then she was released from her contract. It was just so expensive. They couldn't afford it any longer. It was good. She was good for the orchestra. She was good for the audience. So it was time to look for somebody else. And that's when I stepped in. The board now, I don't know why. I don't know what the dynamic was, but shrunk down to about 4 people. Hardly enough people to even fill the officer slots. Okay, so now we have 2 different things. We want to maintain the orchestra without a conductor, without a chief, and now we're going to do guest conductors. We're going to look for somebody, hopefully in 1 year. It took 2. And build the board. What do we have here? We don't have anybody to go out and work. And so that was addressed. And I just read in the bio, orchestra bio, that they are now at 12. Again, solid board. It's a good board, working well. And so the orchestra becomes healthy again. They even got a raise this year, I understand. And so that's all.
How many are in the orchestra today?
I'd say probably, I'm guessing 55 to 60.
What does it take to create a symphony orchestra? I mean, I'm going to have a symphony orchestra. How do I make that happen? What do I go out and get to fill out my minimum orchestra?
Yeah, I think a little advertising. Now it's online.
Yeah. But what do I need?
Oh, well, you're going to need a couple flutes, a couple oboes, a couple clarinets, a couple bassoons, a couple horns, trumpets, and some trombones and maybe some percussion, a timpanist, and about 25 string players in sections, maybe six, and 4 violas and 3 to 4 cellos and 2 to 3 basses, and that would be a nice solid ensemble.
Many more strings.
Many more strings.
And why do you need more strings?
Color.
Color.
One string, you can hear it. 12 strings is an ensemble. It's a color of sound that you want to play anything. And then the balance, of course, the winds can play through that sound, not with ease.
You
The
need
conductor
more
says,
strings because those other instruments are stronger.
They're stronger, and the color is of that sound, of that oboe, can match, and it can go into a whole physics thing with overtones and such. But the beauty of that instrument coming through the strings as a solo instrument, well, the strings might have to, they can't just go like, at will, playing as loud as they can. They do have to shush sometimes for a nice flute solo.
So what are the challenges today for a symphony orchestra?
Challenges, still the same. Money, to get money. Now that's not the orchestra's sole business. But the challenge is to get audience. You don't want to play for just a few people in the audience in a large hall. So you want to play for somebody. So let's get the people, and of course the challenge is to play well, and it's pretty healthy right now. Milwaukee is healthy. Chicago's healthy. I think people are coming back after the pandemic. They're coming back into the orchestra, and also the audience. Noticing also that the programming is a little different. For instance, on the 8th of October, Bob Hasty put together a Halloween concert. And of course, that's always a good move. It kicks off with every kind of color that is imaginable. We're going to have film music, especially. The Harry Potters and the E.T.s and the whatevers is just a flourish of sound, fun sound.
And they've gone multimedia as well?
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe not the Kenosha Symphony.
Oh, but major orchestras
Yes.
have. Yeah, they have the technicians and so forth to throw all that stuff up on a screen and play with the movie.
And is that because you are trying to attract audience? Or?
Absolutely. Home Again, is that the name of the
Home
movie?
Alone?
Home Alone, yeah. Playing that film score. Now, the film scores are of the writers these days, and past and post, is brilliant. John Williams, where does he come up with this stuff? There's just so many wonderful pieces to play.
And the future for?
I think it's healthy. I don't see any reasons except for, again, maybe a crash in the market or something like that, somebody can't handle it, or another pandemic. That was, the pandemic just took the life out of the arts around the world. And people had to rethink of how to remake things again. It was just, people were out of work for 2 or 3 years. Getting the same ones back No, a lot of them took different jobs some other place where they could get work. You know, they had to put something on the bread table. So, yeah. But I think if all things being equal, I think we're in pretty good shape. Yeah.
Thank you for joining me today.
Well, you're welcome. Good to be here.